Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Carlo with All You Can Board,
And I am Dylan.
and we're here with another list video talking about two-player games. This time it is games that work best at two players. So these are games that go, in most cases, above two players, sometimes under two, but that we feel strongly play best by far at two players. These aren't necessarily going to be ranked in terms of what is our number one on the list isn't necessarily our favorite game or better than the other ones. It's just that they specifically play that much better at two players. And something we talked about in our last video where we talked about the best two-player only games is that we like the kind of that dual tug of war kind of closed loop system that those two-player games create. So I know for my list, that's what I was trying to go for with a lot of them, but not necessarily all. What about you? Anything different about your criteria there?
Mine are a little all over the map. I have like a lot of different weights and different genres of games here. It's really just out of my collection and out of the ones I've played, which games I think that can play with higher player counts or lower player counts are best at two, and I've ranked them in terms of their performance as two-player games. And I guess we should mention, like, we do not have any games on this list that are two-player only games. If you're looking for that, that's a separate video. So we have done that video, I'll link it above, but this is games that have a wider player count that we specifically want to call out at two players.
Yeah. And so before we get into the list, just quick question, because spoiler alert for those who didn't watch the other two-player video that we did, we each picked 5 games, and not only did we have 3 games that overlapped, but they were the number 4, 3, and 2 all in the same position.
Yeah.
What are you expecting here?
I don't know. If that happens again, we're going to have to start consulting each other ahead of time with these lists, because as it was happening last time, I'm like, well, how am I going to explain this in the video? We're going to end up having match. I thought we were going to have number 1 matching for a while, too, so I thought we were going to end up having, like, identical lists, which I guess that's fine too, but I think we'll have, I don't know, I think we're either going to have 1 overlap or none. That's my guess.
None? Okay, no, I'm pretty confident. I'd bet that we have for sure 1,
Yeah.
but I don't think we'll have more than 1. Okay. I think it's just going to be 1 this time.
1 would make sense to me, but it wouldn't shock me if we had 0. But
okay.
Yeah, I think I know the one.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, when you guess 0, I'm like, what are you talking? You know exactly which game is going to be. Okay,
for sure.
Right. Okay, so let's kick off the list starting with your number 5.
All right, so my number 5 is Pandemic Legacy.
Ooh.
Season 1. Now, I put Season 1 here. I'm just going to put it like this. Really, you could pick Season 2, Season 0. I haven't played those ones specifically. And really, you could almost replace this with Pandemic. And I almost did put Pandemic here. The reason I'm putting Season 1 here is because Pandemic as a whole, I think, even though it plays higher player counts, is a great example of just being a perfect two-player co-op experience. There's multiple different types of characters you can pick. Again, for people who maybe, there's an opportunity to, introduce someone who's maybe newer to board games or newer to the heavier games or heavier-ish games like Pandemic and help them through it because it's a cooperative experience. You can say, like, if you don't mind, here's something you could do or we could do this. You can almost work together on both characters throughout the entire experience. This one's rewarding in the sense because you're playing over a long period of time and the game lasts a while. You have this experience you can keep coming back to that I think works really well with 2 because it's just so much easier to get it to the table consistently.
Yeah.
With 4, you have to make sure you're coordinating a group that wants to meet regularly, can meet regularly, especially if it's still a pandemic, to play this game over, X amount of sessions. With 2, you might be playing with someone you live with in the house, with a roommate, a partner. You might have a friend who lives down the street that now all of a sudden you just need that one person to get together to continue the campaign. So I think the campaign aspect is really good with 2, but also just Pandemic as an entire, powerhouse genre of games at this point is really good with 2. So it kind of has both those things going for it. That's why I put on this list. I had a great experience as a 2-player campaign with this, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who is, either has a roommate or a partner that is already into board games or that you want to introduce. This is a great way to sort of reward them with an experience that lasts over a long period of time. I know I've been recommending you play this for a while.
I was going to say I haven't tried any of the Pandemic Legacy games. I'll just say right now, Pandemic Iberia almost made my list. I totally agree with you that any Pandemic game works best at 2 in my opinion. And these types of games that are like these, it's an experience, I think a lot of the time are going to work best with 2 because if you have more players, sometimes it dilutes everyone's experience a little bit, and you obviously don't want to do it solo, so 2 is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I've got to play this at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not your copy, because you've destroyed all the
destroyed
components
it pretty
and
much,
wrecked
but
everything, basically.
A copy.
But yeah.
So that's my number 5, Pandemic Legacy, Season 1.
Nice pick. All right, now we are going to go to my number 5, and I'll just say right now, this was the one I struggled with the longest. It's a very new game. I don't know if this will stay on the list. There's other games that almost beat it to it, but I have to go with Micro Macro Crime City. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is a kind of... The game is basically just a giant foldable map. So you get out this giant map, and it's a game where it's a cooperative game, 1 to 4 players, where you're trying to solve these cases, these crimes. So there's these little envelopes that have these cards. There's 16 cases, and you start by basically pulling out a card, and it'll show you a picture of someone and tell you kind of where on the map they either were murdered or something happened to them, and you're trying to retrace their steps. It'll say, so-and-so died over here, who killed them? And you're trying to kind of follow along the map and look for clues and try to uncover kind of this narrative of what's going on in this city. But the twist on this game is that all the panels on the city are kind of different moments in time, or the same moment in time, different moments in time with the same people moving along. So you'll see someone here, and then you can see them a different place on the map, and then you're kind of backtracking, trying to find out where they came from, where they went. The reason why this is an amazing 2-player game and why I think it works by far best at 2 kind of goes back to what we touched on, is like, this is an experience, right? Part of what makes this so good, it's not as much of like a win or lose thing. You're kind of working through these cases together, trying to find the clues. And to me, to do it solo would rob me of the enjoyment of like sharing the highs and lows with someone.
Yeah,
right?
it's one of those things where when you accomplish something, you want to have someone to share in that with you. And if you don't, even if it's a great experience, you have no one to, like, as the proof to really share in that stuff with you. And be like, remember when that happened? And everyone's like, oh, that sounds good, but you were the only one there, right?
Yeah, so. And imagine it's like you're solving a case. You want your almost like buddy cop with you, and it's so cool when someone is like pointing at the map and like, what about this? What about this? And you're following along, and when you solve something together and you're high-fiving, you're like, oh, I can't believe that was such a cool case. And it goes up to 4 players, but it's kind of reminds me of the feeling I get when doing like escape rooms in real life, where once you add a 3rd or a 4th player, everyone's getting less, you're doing fewer of the puzzles in the escape room. So same thing here. You're not going to see as much of the game. More people are going to be doing stuff. So it kind of dilutes it for everyone. And the other thing is just like physically speaking, it's a giant map, and you don't want someone being like upside down looking at it upside down the other side of the table, or everyone's trying to crowd in and whatever. So this is an amazing 2-player game. Highly recommend everyone tries this out. That is Micro Macro Crime City.
Awesome pick. I cannot wait to play it. That's actually one that, I know as soon as you're done, you've already agreed that I'm going to get my hands on it so I can experience it as well.
Definitely. So. It's one I want to lend out to basically everyone I know now, because it's something everyone has to experience.
So good. All right. My number 4 is That's So Clever. This one I can put on the table here because it's a small enough box. So I love this game. I'm a huge fan of roll and writes in general, but this is definitely, I would say, pretty confidently my favorite roll and write. I like... Doppelt so clever, or whatever the English translation is. That's twice as clever, or whatever. I like it as well, and at different times I feel like I like one over the other, but I picked the original here. The reason I picked it is basically just because on the back it says plays great with 2 players, so I'm just a sucker for marketing. No, I'm just kidding. I find that like it plays great with higher player counts. I've played it with 4 players a lot and had a lot of enjoyment. I just think that at 2 players it kind of gets the essence of the game right, where you're very relaxed, you don't have very much downtime. Because there's already this passive player system in there, that eliminates the downtime a little bit already. But with 4 players, you do still have that feeling of waiting for them to finish their rolls. And through 3 other players, it does start to drag a little bit. With 2, you never really feel like you have much downtime, because you're thinking about which dice your opponent's going to leave for you to pick as a passive player. You're getting your turn back really quick. Games go by super fast, so you often want to play more than one when you sit down. It's very easy to say, hey, let's play again. Let's play a 3rd one. It's the perfect game to play with 2 people at a table, and just like it almost feels like it could have been a 2-player only game, and it wouldn't have surprised me. And I think it's even that as you play with higher players, you get less rounds. Is the way it works. Like with 3 players, you have 5 rounds, and with 4 players, you have 4 rounds, and normally with 2, you get 6. And I find that like the 6 rounds feels right. It feels right to have more rounds and more opportunities to roll dice. Whereas with only having four players and only in 4 rolls, it feels like it's not that many. So everything about it just feels like 2 is the sweet spot, and I've always enjoyed it most as a 2-player experience. So I know you have the Twice as Clever, and I think that's your favorite one out of them.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm surprised. I do like Twice as Clever a little bit more, but I've also played that one a lot more because I have the app for Twice as Clever, so that one I've played solo on the app, however many times. This one I just haven't played as much. I definitely agree. Not only, not only does having the extra players, there's more downtime and you get fewer rounds. So it's like in both ways, you have longer time between your turns and you get fewer turns. So yeah, I think it definitely works best as 2 or potentially even solo. But
if you're looking for like a relaxed experience or you like roll and writes already, this is one I always recommend to people, especially, and I've introduced it to a lot of people who don't play board games very often or games beyond the Scrabbles and the Monopolies and everything. And this is one that it's easy to explain the rules and it feels very rewarding to play with too. So it's a really easy experience to introduce to people. So yeah, highly recommend, and that is my number 4.
Nice pick.
Thank you.
All right. My number 4 is the game that I'll just say right now, I think is going to be our overlap game that I was talking about.
Okay.
Santorini.
I won't say anything. You'll have to wait to see.
You won't say anything, but we all know what's going to happen. So this is designed by Gordon Hamilton. This is an older... the original game came out and it was just a whiteboard with white and black pieces. And then Roxley put out this new edition that has all the fancy artwork and the god powers. So this plays 2 to 4 players, but this is one of those ones that I really, really... like. I'm only ever going to suggest it or be the one who wants to play it personally at 2, even though it would be okay sometimes at 3 or 4. But long and short of it, it's a chess-style kind of abstract game where you have this little island and you're stacking blocks on top of each other, and each player has 2 little characters, and you're basically trying to get one of your characters to the 3rd level height of a building, and as soon as you get to that level 3, you win the game. So you're trying to basically, push to get, jump up on higher levels, but your opponent can stop you by doing stuff, and then you can put a little cap on that level 3 so that there's no one can jump up there anymore. And then the god powers just bring out that awesome dynamic of like giving you a special power. And I love, some people who want to play this game competitively or are worried about like, the best player should win kind of thing, say that the god powers kind of, mess with the balance a little bit. And personally, I don't care. Like, when I play this game, I'm not playing just because like, I want to win and for it to be fair. Yeah. It's nice sometimes. Like, we've played this tons of times. We like having the challenge of sometimes you see right at the start, like, this is going to be a really tough matchup. I don't know how I can beat your power, but that's such a fun challenge to play. Yeah. And it's just one of those games because a round can sometimes take like 5 minutes. The last time I introduced this to someone, I brought it over, and I think we played 7 rounds of Santorini in a row, and they just loved it. We just kept like, okay, different powers, deal them out. Such a good game, super easy rules for like anyone to pick up, and just has so much replay value. Like, this is one, even if I don't play it that often, even if I pull it off the shelf like once or twice a year, it's always going to be great every time we play it.
Yeah, and I feel like it's pretty common, like what you were saying, playing multiple games. It's pretty common when I've played to be like, let's play a best of 7, let's play a best of 5. Like, it honestly, and that helps with the balance too, right? Like, if you did feel like you got a weird matchup and you were, at a disadvantage the whole time, if you're doing a best of 5 or best of 7, suddenly, you have the opportunity to sort of balance out the luck aspect because you might get lucky on one of the matchups. Yeah. And there is always the chance that you have an underpowered god, or not underpowered, but just an unfavorable matchup, and you do pull off the win. And it is, if you're playing it for what it is and not feeling like it has to be pure and just be, like, perfectly competitive, I think the god powers make the game. Like, I personally wouldn't. It's still a decent game and good and cool system without any god powers, but the reason I come back to it is the god powers.
Sure. Yeah. It doesn't hurt to show someone to like play 1 round without the god powers maybe, but then get them in there right away. Don't even worry about it being fair and balanced. You'll have a lot more fun with the god powers, I think. But yeah, that is Santorini, my number 4.
Right on. Okay, and my number 3, perfect timing, is Santorini. So
there it is.
I won't say a whole lot more. Like Carlo said, I love this game. This is a go-to 2-player game for me. Sometimes I forget it plays higher than 2 when we were doing our 2-player only list. I had this on my list for a while before realizing it plays more than 2.
Right. Someone in the comments even said, "Hey, Santorini should be on the list," and we're like, didn't want to spoil it, but like.
And the thing is, like, I've played it at 3 a couple times, and I don't mind it at 3. I think that it offers some moments that are really special when there's 2 people having to take care of someone who's getting close to winning and then turning on each other. It's still good, but it's definitely hands down best at 2. And it's like Carlo said, the god powers and this tug of war aspect of like constantly trying to prevent someone from getting onto the top rung, but then also flipping the script on them, and then you starting to put pressure on them. And again, because everyone controls 2 characters, you're able to sort of time when you're moving one, when you're moving the other one, and stuff like that. Like, there's so much depth, there's so much strategy, and adding in the god powers, adding in the expansions, god powers, and everything. Like, there's so much replayability because even if you played a god before, you might not have played it against this god. And I think that this is one that once you have it in your collection, it's one of those abstract games that you're just going to constantly come back to as something, especially if you're like, hey, we only have 20 minutes. Well, you can get a game of Santorini done in that time. You might be able to get 2 done if you have a really quick game to start. So,
and I have to say, the board presence is awesome too. Its little raised island, like really
Yeah,
nice looking game on the table, and especially for showing someone new again, like bringing someone into the hobby who hasn't played
very
these types of
attractive,
games before.
And even great for if you have kids. I guess I don't know what age you'd want to introduce them to this. Maybe like 8 or 9 or 10 for the strategy, but like.
I don't know, my brother taught me chess when I was like 6.
Wow, look at this guy.
I'm not saying I was any good. I'm just saying some people could teach this.
Grandmaster at 8. Wow.
Grandmaster.
Wow. So much confidence. Does it say?
Let me guess. Because
yours says 8+ there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You just didn't even pick that up. It's probably 8 probably good enough. Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but now I had to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that like also that board presence, the way it looks, is also great for kids too. Like
for sure.
Not
very
that,
cartoonish.
Yeah. Not that adults can't obviously enjoy it, and obviously we do, but like it's just something where that table presence is going to help it all around. And just another point to note is that there is another version that either is coming out or is already released that's Santorini New York. And so that has a new theme. I think a lot of the powers are either the same or just twisted a little bit to fit the theme, but there might be some new ones in there as well. So if you're looking to pick it up and you prefer that theme, there is another version to get as well. But yeah, Santorini, can't say anything else about it that you haven't already said, but it just great game. I love it. Easy inclusion on this list. There's just 2 games a little bit higher than it.
Fair enough. All right, and like I said, I imagine that'll be it for the overlap. My number 3 is a game that I don't own and neither do you.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't actually have it here. We're going to get you to pull up the graphic when you're doing our editing here. My number 3, a game that plays best at 2 players, is Innovation. So this is a card building tableau civilization game designed by Carlo. There's 2 editions. One is published by Asmati Games. I don't remember who publishes the other one. They look very, very different. And that's the only reason I don't own the game yet, is that there are 2 very different looking versions, and one of them also has a box that comes with all the expansions, which I'll probably get. This is going to go in my collection at some point. This is an amazing game. Carl Chudik is known as the master of multi-use cards. Systems with splaying cards, so you're putting cards down, you're going racing through the ages. So you start off, I don't remember what age exactly it is, but you've got these level 1 cards, and as you play these cards, you unlock new technologies, and you're basically racing through the ages, gaining new technologies that unlock new things, and you basically have there's certain different types of colors of cards that you have in front of you, and you kind of stack them. You can only have 1 card of each color, but as you stack them up, eventually you'll get things that say splay the cards, and you're kind of splaying them out, and they show a bunch of symbols, and you're comparing symbols with your opponents to see who can play off each other's cards. And what I love about Innovation is, first off, feels like a completely different game every time. Secondly, it's got this constant thing that I talk about, what I love about two-player games, which is the tug of war and the back and forth, where you never... There's so many times you play it where you feel like you're going to be completely out of it. You're like, how am I possibly going to dig myself out of this hole? Yeah. And then suddenly you find this crazy, whoa, this card will play off of this in a way. And suddenly you flip the game and you're able to draw cards from a new age and jump ahead. And now your opponent is like, what just happened? The game just slipped through my fingers. I had this under my control. I feel like I've only played it maybe 5 or 6 times, but it's a game that I can see over the course of my life probably playing 50 to 100 times. Incredible game. I think adding a 3rd or a 4th player would bog it down a lot of it because of the comparing symbols. There's these dogmas that come up where it's like, oh, if you have the most of this symbol and you're looking at everyone's cards, how many do you have 7 of that, how many do you have? So there's that, and also because turns, can take a bit of a time, just because there's a fair amount of complexity considering it's basically just cards. It's not something I would ever even want to play with 4 for sure. I would consider it with 3, but honestly, this is an incredible 2-player game. One of my favorite tableau builders. I think you've played it once with me.
I've only played it once, and the thing is, it's one of those games, even after having played it once, you can tell sometimes that when a game has more to explore and when something clicks. And it clicked with me. I haven't gone back to I think we played it on Board Game Arena. I haven't even played the physical version of it, but it's something that I know on multiple plays will probably get the kind of hook in me in the same way that a game like Lost Cities did, where, after I played enough times, all of a sudden I was like, aha, there's that aha moment, and you're like, I'm going to come back to it for these reasons. This will be one of them. I just have to get it to the table more, or own it, or just play it on BGA more because I've only played it once, and that's probably one of the reasons it's not on my list.
Right. Yeah, great game. Different wind conditions. Like, you just pivot and go another direction. Oh, it's so tactical. So many unexpected decisions to make along the way. Highly recommend you try Innovation. And as Dylan said, it is on Board Game Arena. So, that's my number 3 game that plays best at 2 players.
All right, my number 2, I flip-flopped a little bit. I shouldn't even say that. I knew what number 1 was going to be. I just considered for a second that maybe this could be number 1, but I realized that it couldn't. But very close, number 2 is Marvel Champions.
Oh.
So Marvel Champions obviously plays solo. It plays 2, it plays 3, it plays 4. This is a great example of a game that it's so close. I almost think on different days I might even think this is better at solo. But the times I've played this with 2, there's just some aspect of being able to work with someone else against this villain that works so well as a 2-player game that it just can't be recreated at solo. At solo, I've had moments where things go south and I find a way to turn them around, or these, great draws from the deck that I'm like, oh my God, can you believe I got this combo together, that I have no one to share it with. And with 2 players, you have those moments, right? Yeah. So that's the thing that makes 2-player slightly better for me, but I think that 2-player is vastly better than 3 and 4, and it's not bad at 3 and 4, and I know a lot of people really enjoy that, and I appreciate that Marvel Champions can accommodate that. If all of a sudden you have some more people over and you still want to play it, you can. I find that when you get to HP levels that are that high, when you have that many turns going on before you get back to yourself, when you have that many other players to consider, as you're making your turn, saying, hey, I'm going to deal with some threat. Are you going to deal with some threat? Like, when you have 4 or 3 other players to check with, it starts to bog down the game if you're really trying to win and getting competitive about it. Whereas with 2, when we've played, it's been the perfect sweet spot of you're only checking with one person, you're also letting them do their own thing, but you're only having to think, what is one other person going to do on their turn before it gets back to me, right? So I mean, it's no secret. I'm obviously a huge fan of Marvel Champions. It's one of my favorite games now. It would probably, if I was doing, one day we'll do an all-time board game list. There's a good chance this is in my top 10 somewhere. I love it. So it makes this list because I think it is slightly better at 2 than solo. But I mean, I almost don't even have to say anything else about this. If you want to know my thoughts on Marvel Champions, check out any of my videos that I've done. It's just great in also the sense that, like, I can own this, and Carlo, if he really enjoys Marvel Champions as the second player, can go and pick up one hero pack, have a deck he can play with me, and he can borrow some of my cards to deck build and stuff like that too. We've even talked about that. If all of a sudden you want to dip your toe in the water and they release some hero that you're like, hey, I actually really like that hero. You could buy a single pack for $15, and when it comes to us playing, you have everything you need to play, right? So. Yeah, I love it. I think it plays best of 2, and that's why it is my number 2 pick. And it almost, for a slight second, could have been number 1, but there's another game that I just couldn't put over it, or couldn't put this over top of that.
And Marvel Champions is a lot like Aeon's End, which I've obviously owned for a few years, and I think like I enjoy Marvel Champions as well. I don't like it as much as you do, but I think part of that is because I've played so much Aeon's End over the years. Kind of the idea of picking your hero, fighting a boss kind of thing is like I've experienced the system a decent amount. But one thing that I will say about Marvel Champions that I like more, and that actually is better about it as 2 players compared to playing it solo, is the deck building aspect. I can imagine when you're sitting at home just building a deck, like, yeah, it's fun, but when we were picking a boss, it's like, oh, okay, I'll go leadership if you go ally, and if you put that card, that'll go so good with this card. So even the deck building part is like one of my favorite parts of the game, and with 2 players, that's just at a next level compared to doing it solo.
Well, do you remember when we used to sit around, at home playing Magic the Gathering? But we would also, when we're not playing, we would actually sit there and be building decks, and like you would have all your cards splayed out in front of you with your 4 copies of Thorn Elemental here and your 4 copies of Elvish Piper here, and be like, should I remove 1 copy? Like, can I keep the 4? And I'm helping you, you're helping with me with my deck, and then we're gonna pile the decks against each other, but we're like helping each other. We would spend hours doing the deck building before we even played a game.
Exactly.
This reminded me of that when we were sitting at the cabin playing, and we were both saying like, oh yeah, incorporate that into your deck. But now instead of playing against each other, it's all in our best interest because we're working together, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think this is the only game, or one of the only, maybe along with Aeon, no, because Aeon's End doesn't have deck, but it's probably the only game I can think of on either of our shelves that I would ever be okay with getting the game out, building the decks, and then being like, we'll leave those for another time for when we're actually going to play. Like, there's no game that you're going to pull out and do some sort of setup and not play the game. But Marvel Champions, if I knew, like, well, now these are teed up for next time, and like that speaks volumes as to like that 2-player experience of just building a deck with your friend, coming up with a strategy. So yeah, very cool. And I didn't expect it to be on your list for some reason. Maybe I think I thought you liked it more solo, but
it's close. And like I said, it might change day by day, but I can't deny how good of a 2-player game it is. So. Yeah.
Oh, nice pick.
Marvel Champions, number 2.
All right, on to my number 2, which, following up my other one, is another tableau builder. And this is Race for the Galaxy. This is designed by Tom Lehman. This is a fairly old game now. I think it came out in 07, so almost 15 years. One of the first games I ever bought. This will never leave my collection. One of my favorite games of all time, just regardless of player count. And this is one, like the other games on my list so far, are games that I would really, really strongly suggest to and almost not recommend the other player counts, whereas this one is still an amazing game with 3 or 4, but I just love how well they've scaled it to 2. It's basically you got a giant deck of cards you're going through. Everyone starts a certain number of cards and a little starting world in front of you, and you're playing cards to kind of build out your tableau. There's cards where you can get goods and you can consume goods, or place these worlds. You can gain military strength and all this stuff, and you're having to discard cards to pay for the cards. So it's that dilemma of which cards do I want to keep to play, or which ones do I discard in order to play the ones I want to actually play, similar to Marvel Champions we were just talking about.
I was going to say that it's telling that we both enjoy that mechanic, because one of my favorite games is Marvel Champions. One of your favorite games is Race for the Galaxy, and both of them have that mechanic of, do I use a card or do I spend it? Yeah. And that's such an interesting dilemma. And they're not the only games to do that, but I think we both realize we appreciate that mechanic in games.
For sure, because it's kind of reminds you of the Knizia thing we always talk about that we like too, where he pushes you in one direction. Like, yeah, sure, you can do this, let's get you points, but then you have to basically say goodbye to that. And it's like, I guess I can play this, but then I have to discard this other card that I really wanted to play. And you can just hold them and wait and keep drawing more cards, but then you're not going to get anything done. Yeah. But what makes this, I think, best at 2 players, or amazing at 2, is that the game plays with these simultaneous actions, where basically normally, if you're playing a 3 or 4 player game, at the start of every round, every player picks an action card secretly face down, then we all reveal, and then we resolve those actions in kind of a predetermined order. With 2 players, each player is picking 2 of those action cards instead. So you might see a different dynamic because there's fewer people. Like there aren't, and with 4 people are going in different directions with their strategy maybe, so there's more options to consider in that way. But with 2 and 2 players picking 2 actions, more happens every round. These phases might trigger more than once. And for a tableau builder to play in, I think I played 2-player game of this in Board Game Arena the other day in 15 minutes. And even the physical version with shuffling cards and setup and whatever is 25-30 minutes for 2 players. You don't get many 2-player games that play this quickly and have this satisfying of a feel to them. The rule set is a little tricky if you've never played before with all the iconography and stuff, but if you haven't played this, try it out. And if you're worried about it as a 2-player game, don't worry about it, because it's absolutely best at 2 players. That is Race for the Galaxy. I could talk about this game all day. I've played it 50 times, just the base version alone. Don't even need expansions yet. It's just an amazing game.
Awesome pick. Yeah, I have only played it a handful of times. I've played it more recently, finally, because it had been years since I played before that. Yeah. But I think it's a great game. I want to play it more, properly experience it. And, Carlo will hate me for saying this, but if you're looking, I know some people are always looking for what's the newest or whatever. There is a game coming out called Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition that apparently merges this kind of game with Terraforming Mars, that if you're looking for the newest version of iteration of this type of system, it does borrow some things, and that has a solo mode is the only thing that might differentiate.
Yeah. But it probably won't be as good as this, because it's tried and tested, 15-year classic.
There you go. Maybe play the original first, but it's not even part of the same genre, but it's just they're boring mechanics. But hey, if Terraforming Mars, which is a huge board game that a lot of people love, is choosing to borrow mechanics from Race for the Galaxy, and I'm sure this isn't the only game to do it, but it should tell you something about the quality of what they've got here.
No, it's true. And to be fair, I am excited to try Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition and see, because the Mars theme is obviously appealing. So I'm curious to see how much they take from this. But
yeah, no kidding.
Anyways, that's my number 2, Race for the Galaxy.
All right, we're into number 1s. I knew my number 1, like I said, right from the start, and it only faltered for a second. This is an easy pick for me, and that is Castles of Burgundy. So Castles of Burgundy is not only my number 1 on this list, it's not my number 1 of all time, but it's one of my favorite games of all time as well. It's a game that will always be in my collection. I love it. I will never say no to a game of it. And I personally think it is best at 2, and I know a lot of people feel that way. But it's interesting because with these more complex games, and it's not overly complex, but it's more complex than some people might expect from a 2-player experience, or just in general, usually 2 players is not the sweet spot. Normally in a lot of these bigger games, you want to play with 3 or 4, and that's sort of what you're aspiring to play with. That's when you get the most depth and the most, stuff going on. Castles of Burgundy, it's a case of, here's a game that is kind of complex, has a lot going on, is a bit of a point salad in terms of ways you can score your points and win the game. And at a 2-player experience, it feels not very long at all. Especially after you know the rules, it goes by really quick. It feels very competitive. You're always sort of in the game, and like I've never felt like I've had a two-player game where I'm out of it. The scores usually end up close or feel close throughout, where you're constantly feeling like, oh, yeah, I'm doing good, but so are they, and I have to like continue to do good. You can't just like sit back and say, hey, I'm ahead now. The aspect of only having to worry about one other player in terms of what tiles you're grabbing at what moments is almost more interesting at two, because you realize if I take this, I'm going to leave them this, where with other players, it's going to take a while to get back to. You might be like, this person's going to grab something before it gets back to that person maybe. With one other person, you have to really think, yeah, I could go for this mine, but that means I'm going to leave them a castle. And if I take the castle, I'm going to leave them the mine. What on their board, what do I care about more? Like, it's the right spot to consider what the other person's doing, only have one other board to look at, still be considering your own, and if I'm going after something, getting a lot of points for it because of that point salad nature, you can say, hey, I'm going to counter that by going after this, and we have to decide if we're going to stop each other. Like, everything about it is just, and not only, one other thing I want to mention is that with these type of games, sometimes it can be hard to introduce them to some people because they are a little bit more complex, and it might be something they're not comfortable with. Castles of Burgundy as a two-player experience is a case of I have been super successful in introducing this to people at two that normally this is not the type of the game they would love, and now it's one of their favorite games. And it completely shocks me that it is, because it's not usually the type of game they gravitate towards. So I would just say it's also a great game to introduce to someone that you might have struggled with in the past to play at two players with heavier games. This one might surprise them, might surprise you, and it might be one that you then come back to a lot. Like I said, it's one of my favorite games in general, and it was an easy include because I prefer it by far at two players out of all the player counts.
I think it's definitely best at two, and it's kind of sneaky because a lot of the time, like when you think about a game like this, on the surface it doesn't seem to have like a whole lot of player interaction. But with two, like you said, the fact that everything you don't take is only for one direct opponent, it kind of makes it more interactive by having that lower player count almost. It's a great game. Something I should definitely... I think I've only played it maybe 4 or 5 times. And it's never... Here's the thing about Castles of Burgundy. It's a game that doesn't ever excite me, but it's one of the most, like it's almost like a comforting game. It's like, it's one of those, like, kind of just old classic games that you know what you're getting. You're never going to be disappointed by it because it doesn't pretend to be anything it isn't. Like, you're not going in for like an exciting theme or whatever, but the gameplay is just so satisfying. Everything works so well. I think this is one that, obviously it has already stood the test of time, and I think will continue to for a long time.
For sure.
It's a great game.
Castles of Burgundy, my number 1.
All right. Well, we are going with another fairly old classic game. The first board game since I got back into the hobby around age 19 or so, this is Carcassonne. As you can see, this version is very faded. Not only have I, again, owned this for like almost 15 years now, but this sat in a friend's car who borrowed it for me, left it in the sun for a while, so it's all worn out.
Can we get like Rio Grande games? Can we share this with them? Maybe they'll just send you and you cover for your box.
They're coming out with the 20-year anniversary or whatever. They just came out with it, so I'm probably just going to finally upgrade. I might keep it just for sentimental value.
Of
this
course.
Is seen,
Put it on your wall.
Yeah, exactly. I played this so many times, and actually, I went to Europe in 2016, and I left the box behind, brought all the tiles, and a friend and I, we were staying with our other friend's family in a town nearby Carcassonne, so we actually drove to Carcassonne, and we played Carcassonne inside the walls of Carcassonne. It was such an amazing experience. People walking by, pointing and laughing and stuff. We got people taking pictures. It was great. Experience I will never forget. And this is what got me into modern day board gaming. I had not been playing board games for years and years and years. My brother showed me Carcassonne on Xbox Live, like the app version, and I was like completely entranced. Like, I think I sat there at his house playing for hours that night. He went out of town at some point. I house sat for him. I played this online like crazy. Then I went out and bought the physical version, and this just got me playing this game so much. Plays 2 to 5 players, and it's one of those games that I wouldn't say I don't want to ever play it with more than 2. It's still really good, I think, at 3. And, as an intro game to the hobby, there's nothing wrong with it at 4 or 5, but it's, in my opinion, the best back and forth 2-player duel you can have. The game has, like, I think it's like 71 or 72 tiles or something. So if you think about, no matter the player count, you get an equal amount of tiles per player, right? So with 2 players, you're getting like 30-some tiles each. If you're playing a 5-player game, everyone gets like 13 tiles or something. And every tile you place, you can't be worrying about denying your opponent's stuff. You got to take your points so you can get them. A 2-player game, every single turn is weighing the options of, yeah, this tile can get me maybe a couple points here if I add it to my city, or I can add it here to my road or whatever, but I can add it here and kind of screw over my opponent and like strand one of their followers or something. And because you always only have 7 followers, regardless of player count, you know, again, if you're playing with 5 players, half your turns you have a follower to place, you have so many of them. In 2 players, there's this precious economy of, sometimes, yeah, I can gain however many points by placing this tile, but if I can place it here and it's going to trap 2 of my opponent's followers and I know there's like 30 tiles left in the game, maybe it's worth it. Maybe that loss of followers is really going to add up.
Yeah.
Most people I've played this to, I'll just full disclosure, have not even like... Basically, there's 2 or 3 people who love playing this game with me who have also played it a lot 2 players and like that mean cutthroat style. And then everyone else I've played it with 2 players has not enjoyed playing it with me. And I'm sorry to all those people, but the game, in my opinion, takes on such a brilliant level when you are playing that really cutthroat style where every tile is an opportunity to deny your opponent. This is a game that stood the test of time. I'll never get tired of this. I've played it hundreds of times, just the base version. I don't even want to play it with expansions. Don't let people, you know... I've moved on from Catan, 7 Wonders, Alhambra, all these other old games that I've played in the hobby. You know, Ticket to Ride I don't even play as much anymore. Carcassonne will never fade away for me. It is the greatest, in my opinion, game that plays above 2 but is best at 2 players.
Yeah, and I've only played this a handful of times, but I played it. It was mostly at 2 players, and there was a time recently, just before the pandemic, I believe, that I finally played it with 4. I think it was at your place one time, and it's funny because I didn't think of it at the time or give it much thought, but I remember leaving that session being like, I remember enjoying Carcassonne more the last time I played it, and I didn't even click that, I played it with 2 all the other times. This is the first time I played it with 4. There was something that was, you know, and I'm not well versed enough to be able to identify exactly what it is. I think you've done a better job, obviously, of that, but like, there is something that gets lost, I think, at the higher player counts that is special about Carcassonne at 2. So I think you've identified that, and I think it's a fantastic pick for number 1.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to find someone to play hundreds of games with it first. So you can get up to speed.
And then we can have a full-on duel of match skill.
But yeah, so that was my number 1 pick, Carcassonne. So that is it for our lists. We're curious. Tell us what you think. Do you agree or disagree with any of these picks? What games make your list of games that play best at 2? I know there are tons of them out there that we haven't played yet, especially some of the bigger games. I know a lot of these ones are pretty like quicker, shorter games, but we tend to want that kind of experience when we're playing just a 2-player game, I find, right? But otherwise, is there anything else you want to add? No,
there's more games coming out all the time. These lists can evolve. A Micro Macro is a pretty new game that's on this list that wouldn't have been on this list a year ago. So, hey, by next year we could have a bunch of great games that play great at 2 that would make the list. Maybe we'll have to revisit it, but for now, this is what we got.
Yeah. So thanks as always for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, leave a comment. We appreciate all the support. Otherwise, that's it for us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.